because of that. Anyway, I was loaded in the ambulance, and on the way to the hospital, in the presence of emergency personnel hooked up to the instrumentation that's in the ambulance, I died again. My vital signs zeroed out, and I was dead. I was clinically dead. I was so dead that they called me in dead on arrival. They summoned the district attorney to come and sign my death certificate. The district attorney arrived at the hospital and asked my mother how she was handling my death. That's how convinced they were that I was dead. She turned on him and said, "No, I'm not handling his death good at all because he's alive." "He's alive?" "Yeah, he's alive." My dad said one very significant thing, that he watched the district attorney, his face flushed. He said he quietly exited the hospital and was gone. Anyway, upon getting to the hospital, they began to check me out, and I guess they noticed trauma to the chest, realizing that in most head-on collisions like that, many people die because of bleeding internally, because the aorta itself is significantly damaged and you bleed internally. They did their thing, did the dye injection, all that stuff, and determined I had a significant tear in the aorta. They immediately said I needed to be transferred to Sacred Heart in Eugene for open heart. The discussion raised, well, look, he's traumatized so bad, he's hurt so bad, we don't think he can recover or even sustain open heart. My mother said that to the neurosurgeon. He says, "Lady, if he don't get open heart, he's dead, regardless." So off I went to Sacred Heart. Well, there was a prayer group that came from my dad and mother's church, who pastored in the Marcola area at that time. The prayer group came to the hospital, and they even assigned them a room so that they could pray. Every time a need that came up, they prayed, they prayed, they prayed, they prayed. They prayed about the ripped aorta. They got me to the hospital, and they did their pre-op, they did their pre-checks, they did everything before they did the open heart, and they had a startling discovery. They said the aorta was not ripped at all, was just residual bleeding. Miracle number 2, I wouldn't have been able to sustain open heart at that time. I was traumatized too greatly. Anyway, as time goes on, the neurosurgeon that just happened to be at the hospital that night was the second best neurosurgeon in the state of Oregon. Again, another miracle. That man observed me, knew that there was major trauma to the head, and he stayed up all night to watch my brain scan. At about 1 a.m. in the morning, he concluded that my brain wave was dying, and he knew that there was a blood clot on my brain that was killing me again. He performed brain surgery. He removed the biggest clot off of the brain of a person that had ever survived. I also lost brain tissue at that point in time. They tell me that my head was the size of a basketball from the trauma of the wreck. My mom and dad had gone home that night, and that morning, as they was getting ready to come back to the hospital, they received a phone call from my brother's mother-in-law, who lived in California. She had heard about the wreck, and she had heard that my brother was coming to Oregon, and they told him, "You're probably coming to a funeral, because there's no way this guy can survive. He's been traumatized too great physically." Anyway, she called my mother and said, "Don't worry, he's going to live." She says, "What do you know about this?" She goes, "I was given a dream the night before that this happened. And in my dream, I was walking through the forest with my aunt, and we walked into an open field. And in the field was a casket. And in the casket was a young man that was lying dead in the casket. And we talked to each other, and we decided that when Jesus walked this earth, He said that we can do even greater miracles than He did when He walked on the earth. So we decided we should pray that God would raise Him up. So they did. They prayed. They joined together and prayed. They said soon the young man sat up in the casket, looked around, stepped out of the casket and walked away. So she said, God delivered a message to me before this even happened. Not only is he going to live, he's going to be normal. Well, I tell you what, that was a big relief to my mother and to everybody that was involved in intercession for the process. Because all the word they got from the neurosurgeon and everybody else that was around me said, we don't want to get your hopes up, he's going to die. He can't live, he's going to die. And shortly after the surgery, I did go into a coma, which is basically a slow death process. When you're comatose, you're slowly dying. Anyway, I got good news for you. 3 weeks after the surgery to remove the biggest blood clot off the brain they'd ever seen anyone have and live, I came out of the coma. Another miracle. Another miracle. God woke me up, and I began to recover at an astounding rate. The neurosurgeon, who marveled at the whole situation, told my dad, and the man wasn't even a believer. He said, I don't understand the process, but I can tell you, for every day he's here, he's healing 3 days to 1.
Wow.
It's an accelerated healing process. He'd never seen anything like it. I began to improve at a dramatic rate. Finally, they admitted he's going to live. But don't get your hopes up. His brain is severely damaged. He's not going to be even close to normal. In fact, we think he's paralyzed. Wasn't long after that I crossed my legs as I laid on the bed, and everybody got real happy about it, and no one knew what was going on until they explained to us later that when you cross your legs, you're not paralyzed.
Amen.
Again, another miracle. It goes on. One of the things that didn't come along fast at all, at least we didn't think fast at all, is my mouth. My mouth would not open. Come to find out, the portion of the brain that controls the mouth was destroyed in the accident. Oh well, what's that compared to a miracle working God? One day my mom and dad decided it's time for him to open his mouth. They'd seen enough. They wanted the mouth to open. So Mom gets a soup spoon, puts it in her purse, and says, Dad, we're going to the hospital, and we're gonna see his mouth open. Okay. So they get in the hospital. Mom gets the spoon out of her purse, says, Dad, you're gonna pray, I'm gonna pry. Boom, the spoon goes into the mouth. She begins to do the praying thing. He begins to do the praying thing. All of a sudden the mouth opens. Boom. Another miracle. Chalk another one up. All of a sudden my hands go up. Dad knows I'm out of my mind, so he puts them down. Again my hands go up. He puts them down again. A third time they go up. He leaves them alone. I begin to pray, and I wasn't even aware of what was going on. I have no memory of that at all. I began to pray, and I said 3 very significant things, and it was the Spirit of God praying through me, you must understand. I said, God is forever. God is eternal. There is no condemnation. That was a message being delivered directly to me that he told me about later. I'll expand upon that a little bit later as we go through the process. Anyway, from that point on, I could eat a little bit, and I could begin to speak a little bit, but remember, that's the portions of brain that was destroyed. You shouldn't be able to do that stuff right away, but I did. But in the process of it all, it shouted loud and clear, yes, there is a God. Yes, He does perform miracles. Yes, He does care. Yes, He does love you.